So today we're gonna talk about pellet testing in real world. And again, I like to use a water bucket. I like to shoot them into a water bucket, 10-15 feet into a water bucket, because I've found for the most part that shooting them in a water bucket gives you a pretty accurate gauge as to how they're going to perform when you hit game. Not saying that you can guarantee if you shoot it in the water bucket, then when you shoot it at a game animal, it's going to do exactly what it did in the water bucket. That's not always the case. It's also going to cut through a lot of stuff that gets put out there by what I believe is people who have some alternative reasons why they say the things that they say. So this all started today. Well, actually, I've been working on it for a while, but today I shot a groundhog about, I don't know, he's about between 5 to 6 pounds. Hit him in the head, and it immediately put him down. There was no flipping, no flopping. He was basically done. I used a H&N Barracuda Hunter, the 18.21 grain. And I've shot 2 groundhogs with the H&N Hunters. I've shot 2 groundhogs with H&N Hunter Extremes. I've shot some squirrels with some redfires. I've shot some squirrels with some polymags, and I've shot some squirrels with some H&N Terminators. I've also shot a squirrel with a redfire in 177 caliber. All of these pellets up here are 22 caliber, and down here I got these 3, the Ultra Shot, redfire, and polymag. There's people out there that tell you that you know, the redfire is the best pellet. It's better than the polymag. Yada 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 yada. They go on and on and on and on about it. They'll shoot it in some clay, and you'll see it expand like this. They'll shoot it in clay, and you'll see it expand like this, or expand like this, or it'll even expand more than that. Same thing with these polymags. You'll shoot them and you'll see them expand like this, and they'll say this is better than this because look how this opens up. Which, in theory, yes, that's very much the case. In theory, you know, I'd want to hit a squirrel with that, have it open up like that, and blow a hole like that. Maybe with this you would get more penetration because it rolls more. Who knows? But that's not what happens in real world. That might happen. It might expand like this if you're shooting 10 or 15 or 20 yards. But when you start to stretch it out and shoot farther, that don't happen. I done shot a couple tins of red fires, and I done hit a lot of squirrels with some red fires, and I have yet to recover one that looks like that. I've yet to recover one that looks like that. I've shot some squirrels with polymags, right? And I've yet to recover one that looks like that when I recover one. Do they blow nice holes? Yes. Do they take down games? Yes. But do they expand like that? Not at range. Not when you start getting past maybe 25. When you start stretching them out to 30 or 35 yards, they don't expand like that. And I'm talking shooting them at 24, 25 foot-pounds. That hasn't been my experience. But I'm gonna try to put this clip in. I'm gonna try to put these pictures in to show you what this pellet did today to this groundhog. how deep it penetrated, and what type of damage it did, and what the pellet looked like after I got it out. But basically, I shot him with an H&N Hunter. This is a H&N Hunter, H&N Barracuda Hunter, 18.21 grain. When you shoot them in a water bucket, this is what they look like. When you shoot them in a water bucket, they look like this. Sometimes they'll even shed this outer ring, and you'll get a center pellet and this outer ring. Now people will tell you, oh, that's too much. You know, that pellet's fragmenting, it's not doing what it's supposed to do. You'll get that crew that says it's overexpansion. But you got to realize this is only 10 or 15 feet. You know, how often do you get a shot at a game, at a squirrel, or at a groundhog, or any game animal, rabbit, whatever, wherever it may be, where you're 10 to 15 feet away? Very rare. Most of my shots are 20, 25, sometimes 30 yards. So you're never going to have a case where the pellet is going to expand like this, because it's just not going to have the velocity. But a pellet that expands very, very well in a water bucket, or in a test something like a water bucket, stands a much better chance of expanding when you start to get the range. Which brings me to these two pellets. I took this one out of a groundhog that I shot in the head probably 25 yards. And I shot a groundhog with this one today. This is the actual one I pulled out of the groundhog today. This was about 20 yards. This pellet right here went in just behind the eye on the left hand side, and ended up stopped just under the ear on the opposite side, and it expanded to, this is right around 0.299 to 0.313, you know, right in that area. Same thing with this pellet. This pellet expanded about the same. Another pellet is this is the H&N Hunter Extreme. This is 18.52 grains, I do believe. These are what they look like when you shoot them in a water bucket. This is the typical of how they expand when you shoot them in a water bucket. These two I pulled out of groundhogs. This one I shot a groundhog in the head. That one I shot a groundhog in the head. This one hit in front of the brain cavity, basically went right behind the eyes, went from one side to the other. It took a follow-up shot, but this expanded to point. It's almost the same. These two pellets are almost the same. They all expand. These H&N Hunters, these H&N Hunter Extremes all expand about the same. There's really not too much difference. It's very minimal in the difference in expansion in these two pellets. Same thing with this one. I shot this one. This one actuality went through the brain cavity, ended up in the base of the spine. Basically went in the eye, went through one side of the brain, and ended up in the base of the spine. And both of these pellets have expanded close to 30 caliber, just like these two have expanded close to 30 caliber pellet. Which then brings me to these redfires. I shoot a lot of these redfires, and I like them because they're easy to get. You can go to Walmart and buy these redfires, and when you shoot them in a water bucket, they look like they're really gonna be nasty. They look like they're really gonna put in work. But every time I shoot them and hit something, they don't expand like I expect them to. This was a 40-yard shot. I hit a squirrel 40 yards, and it basically, I found a pellet on the opposite side. I think I hit him up in the shoulder, and it went through his neck and ended up in the opposite shoulder, and that's what it looked like at 40 yards. And this is typical. These pellets are typical of what I get when I shoot 30 yards with these redfires. It's just like they don't seem to expand like you expect them to expand. They don't follow the norm of the water bucket. They do real good in the water bucket, but they do real bad in soft game for some reason. Maybe it's something to do with the flesh or the skin, or going through the skin, or something. But it just doesn't seem like they really expand when you find them and you recover them. Now, when they blow clean through, when they're traveling real fast and they go clean through, that might be a complete different story. But when you find them in game, where they've slowed down and hit game, I've found that they don't expand. Same thing with these polymags. That's a polymag. That's a polymag in a water bucket. And that's 2 polymags from 2 squirrels I shot at about 35 to 40 yards. Do they expand a little bit? Yes. But if you compare this polymag to this redfire, there's really not a lot of difference in how much they expanded. I wouldn't consider one better than the other than the fact that the redfire is cheap. You know, that's the only advantage to the redfire, is the redfire is cheap. Another pellet that does real well, H&N Terminator. See the H&N Terminator? And get that to focus. That's what they look like when you shoot them in a water bucket. And that's what they look like when you pull them out of game. Granted, it's not no great massive expansion, but it's still some compared to that. Still some. Where you got almost none with this, and you got almost none with that. It's almost the same. So, another pellet that I've shot in the water bucket that looks like it's going to be fantastic. Skenco Ultra Shock, 16.66 grains, I do believe, but that's what it looks like when it hits the water bucket. It turns into a pancake. But how we'll perform in game, I don't know. As you can see, there's none of them over here. When I get one over there, then we'll talk about the Skenco Ultra Shock and what it does when it hits game. Another one I like in my 177 is this JSB Ultra Shock in 177. That's what it does in a water bucket. Now, I have shot some Sterlings with this, and it blows a massive hole. But just because it blows a massive hole doesn't mean that, you know, the pellet looks like this. Until I can recover a pellet and compare them, you're just guessing. And then there's a difference between hitting a bird with some feathers and hitting a squirrel with some fur, or hitting a groundhog in the head and hitting all that bone. You know, it may not perform like that. And the reason why I say that is because, again, here's that redfire. Here's a redfire in a water bucket. Right? That's what it does in a water bucket. But look, I pulled that one out of a squirrel. I shot him probably, I don't know, 35, 40 yards. Look at it. It almost looks exactly like the unfired pellet. This pellet went through the squirrel's neck and ended up in his opposite shoulder. Went like through the left hand side, right in front of the front left shoulder. Went through his neck and lodged, went through the right shoulder and ended up in the hide. And look at it. It almost looks like you could load it in a gun and shoot it again. But it expands like that in a water bucket. See that? It expands like that in a water bucket. So you would think it would expand. I brought this pellet. I put this pellet in here for a reason, because look at it compared to the one I shot out on my 22. It seems like that's just the thing with this pellet. Like, this pellet just doesn't really get it to focus. Like, this pellet just doesn't really open up in fur animals. I mean, I've hit bone with them too. I think that's why these open up, because I hit bone. You know, they didn't have any choice. But when you just hit a lot of flesh and really don't blow through a lot of bone, maybe that's just the nature of that pellet. But that pellet really don't expand. If you think it is, it has a good possibility it's not, because, you know, I shot that out of my Gauntlet. And out of my Gauntlet, that's traveling in the 920s, something like that, in the 920s out of my Gauntlet. So it's moving, and it doesn't expand. Same thing with this. Let me see if I can get it to focus. Same thing with this polymag. That's a polymag short. You know, it looks real good in theory when you're looking at it out of the water bucket. But what is it going to do when it's over here? When you shoot it into a game animal, what does it look like then? And then that's the other thing you got to think about. Just because you shoot an animal once, like example, like I shot a squirrel with this redfire one time, and I get this expansion, and I'm like, oh, this is the best pellet in the world. Oh, it's great, it's fantastic, it's wonderful, it expands, it does this, it does that. And then I shoot the next 10 squirrels and it does this, right? It don't mean nothing. You got to shoot multiple animals. You got to do, like I said, all this shooting in the bucket and shooting in the clay and all that stuff like that. It don't mean nothing. It don't mean nothing until you start shooting them out in the field and you recover them. Because then you really know what they're doing. If you ain't recovering your pellets or making an effort to recover your pellets, and you're on YouTube talking about, oh, this pellet's great on game because it expands like this in some clay, or it expands like this when I shoot it in some ballistics gelatin, then you're not really telling the whole story. Because it can expand real great in ballistics gelatin, but it may not expand at all when you shoot a game animal. Or it may not expand at all when you shoot at game animals at hunting ranges. 20 yards, 25 yards, 30, 35, 40 yards. Now what I like about the heavier pellets that do expand, like these, the heavier pellets that do expand, that at range, even if they don't expand, like this, these red fires aren't going to expand. It's just obvious when you get to like 40 yards, they're not going to expand. The heavier pellets carry more weight. They carry more hit. They have more knockdown power, carry more kinetic energy, have a chance of penetrating more, just because they weigh more and they're carrying more punch. And after all this, no matter how well a pellet expands out of your gun, you know, if it's not accurate, then it really does make a difference if it expands or not. Usually I will go out in the yard and grab a handful of rocks and throw at your bunny rabbit or your squirrel or your groundhog, because if your gun's not accurate, that's basically what you're doing. You're just grabbing a handful of rocks and throwing them at him and hoping that you hit something. Hopefully real soon I'm going to be hunting some stuff with these Skenco Ultra Shocks. I think they're just a little too soft to shoot groundhogs with. I think groundhogs are just going to, like, they're going to suck it up. I don't think they hit hard enough, and they flatten out too much. They're really not going to penetrate. That's why I've been using the H&N Hunters and the H&N Hunter Extremes. But again, I'm not trouting H&N Hunter, and I'm not trouting H&N. It's just a pellet that's accurate out of my gun. If I shoot a ton of red fires, and I'll continue.